Thank you so much for joining me today. You're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. I'm Gary Zacharias. I started a podcast last time. I got halfway through a chapter in a book called The Compact Guide to World Religions. Really good. Dean Halverson is the general editor, and then a lot of good authors in each chapter. So I was doing the New Age movement. And so I'm just going to real briefly hit what we covered last time. Definition for the New Age movement, the history and roots of it. We talked a little bit about the core beliefs, saying things like, for them, the problem is perception, who we are, their view of God. And of course, it's monism and pantheism. Monism, the belief that God is one, there's no separation within God. And this oneness is a force or an energy. And then it's pantheism in the sense that God is everything, all is divine. Everything is connected and an emanation from the divine oneness. Also looked at their view of humanity. Our problem is ignorance, not rebellion. The power of our mind, the immediate goal. Right, we got to go on to the next stage here. So let's see, the call for assistance. They encourage people to get in touch with spirit guides. And the ultimate goal is to relinquish all attachment and identification with your individual ego and get yourself merged into the universal self. The next section we covered was some common New Age arguments and objections. Things like, Christians are so judgmental. I want to be part of something that's loving. Okay, so that's one issue. Number two, because the book of Genesis teaches that humanity is separate from and above nature, Christian beliefs are responsible for the way we've exploited the planet and caused a lot of harm. Okay, there are a lot of good answers to these. I'm just telling you what some of their charges were. Number three, Christians believe God will send people to hell because of their bad deeds. Why would you believe in a God of love punishing anybody by sending him or her to hell? Reincarnation seems so much more just. So those were the charges, and we covered them and the responses that Christians can give. So let's pick up now. This is the new part that I want to get to. They said New Agers respond that the above arguments are why reincarnation makes sense. It gives people the opportunity over and over again in different lifetimes, thanks to reincarnation, to learn lessons, to get better, to conform themselves to the character of a holy God. Well, the authors of this article say there's some problems with that. First of all, they said that perspective about learning more and more and getting the opportunities to get in touch with God, that underestimates the seriousness of sin. I mean, the Bible says in Ephesians we're dead in our sins, and sin makes us blind to the truths of God. That's in Ephesians 4. So we are so messed up. We are going to need outside help to be transformed. As they said in the chapter here, dead people can't give themselves life, and blind people can't give themselves sight. That's really good. So second point they bring up, this idea of recycling, reincarnation. They said, as we learn these lessons of love coming back again and again, we're going to do other bad things. Then we're going to have to come back and pay for those. It's a never-ending cycle. It's just hopeless. Third, what's this bit about reincarnation if we don't remember past lives? Why are we paying for past actions that we don't remember what those actions were? I always thought that's one of the biggest issues with this whole idea of reincarnation. Seems like every person then should know exactly in the past life, these are the things I did wrong. I was too selfish. I loved too much money. I cheated on my wife. Whatever it is, you should know so that you can make the changes, appropriate changes. Okay, here's another problem with reincarnation. In some cases, like Buddhism, there's no existential continuity from one life to another, and yet karma continues from one life to the next. So if you've had no connection with a person in a previous lifetime, you're not paying for somebody else's karma. That doesn't seem just. Fifth, they said New Agers violate the law of non-contradiction. What's that law? The law says you can't affirm and deny the same thing in the same respect. For example, a person can't be a bachelor and be a married man at the same time in the same way. So they said, here's the example here. New Agers say reincarnation is more than just the idea that God judges people after one lifetime. Well, what such a statement does is judge a system on the basis of something at the same time that's being denied. How so? Because reincarnation is based on an impersonal principle of the law of cause and effect. Basically, you reap what you sow. But justice is an attribute that's exhibited by people. So they make a statement that New Agers imply there is a standard of justice, but that would mean there's a just God. But reincarnation is impersonal. So somehow they're affirming and denying the existence of a personal God, so it's meaningless. 6, they said the real heart behind the New Agers' call for justice is not so much that of justice, it's compassion. So they said, what's with God judging people? He's supposed to be compassionate. But they said, we can give several responses to that. Are they just as concerned about compassion for the victim? Does it show compassion for the victim to allow his or her murderer to go free and not be judged? That's a good point. Here's another challenge. They see reincarnation like a gospel of a second chance. But in reality, there's no possibility for compassion or for forgiveness in reincarnation. Why? Well, the consequences of your actions are inevitable. You can't escape them. 3rd, they said, where's the compassion to be found in a system that calls for people to suffer through dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of lifetimes for actions that they have no recollection of? And then they said only a personal God is able to show compassion, and he did that. He provided forgiveness through Jesus Christ. So the issue is not whether God is compassionate, but it's whether a New Ager is really willing to accept the kind of forgiveness that God has provided. 7th point, New Agers rebel against the idea that God would judge. It's funny, he said, it's ironic they embrace a system where humanity is judged unconditionally. Right? So that's a good point. Here's another issue that the New Agers bring up. Christians are so arrogant. They say their way is the only way. Right? I mean, we've heard that before. Christians are intolerant, they're narrow-minded, they're arrogant. So arrogance is defined for them as holding a belief that's exclusive of other beliefs. Well, wait a minute. According to their definition of arrogance, New Agers are also arrogant because they have an inclusiveness, the idea that all ways lead to God. That excludes the belief that there's only one way to God. So guess what? They're arrogant too. So I think that's a good point. So the next section of this chapter dealing with New Agers is suggestions for evangelism. I think this is really important. So I want to make sure we hit this. The first thing they say, we should acknowledge their search for spirituality. So obviously Christians disagree with so many New Age beliefs, but we can at least affirm with them and tell them we appreciate there's something more to reality than just the matter of the universe. That's pretty cold and impersonal. Also, he said that we as Christians have to feel a certain conviction that many New Agers have left the church. They've been part of it and they've left it. And it's kind of sad, isn't it? We're seeing that today with a movement called evangelicals. So somehow, New Agers who were in the church didn't sense some kind of real spirituality. And that's a sad thing. And so the authors of this piece said we Christians should take a close look at ourselves. Are we just playing church? Are we actually developing a warm and personal walk with Christ that would be attractive to others? I think that's a good challenge. Number 2, here's another suggestion for evangelism. Major on the primary issues. So think about all the things that we would scratch our heads or we would shake our heads at that they would do, like using crystals and acupuncture and astrology and tarot cards and channeling. It said it's probably best not to make such practices a big issue when you're starting a relationship. Key in, they said, on the worldview that stands behind the practices. So one of the authors gives an example here. He said he has a friend who practices yoga. Well, what if I started in my relationship with him, told him he shouldn't be practicing, it's spiritually detrimental? That's a frontal attack that would probably turn him off. But he says, I have talked to him about how many of the things that he's looking for in yoga, like personal fulfillment, self-improvement, spiritual experience, would actually be better found if he had a relationship with a personal God. I like that approach a lot. Number 3, something else we can do. Be aware of the inherent contradiction in the New Age God. Now think about what they believe. They refer to ultimate reality as universal mind or infinite intelligence. What New Agers are doing through such terms is mixing a kind of language about God that somehow he's impersonal, because they'll say universal or infinite, and the personal, because they'll talk about love and mind and intelligence. So they're trying to get the best of both worlds, but they're ignoring the negative parts of either. So think about this. If God is an impersonal oneness, well, if that was the case, then he would accept us, I guess, and he would be a power that we could manipulate. They like that, but they realize that makes a cold, uncaring God. Yeah, that's a good point. So they don't want an uncaring, cold God, so they'll talk about God being personal. They'll give him attributes like love and goodness. By the way, they never talk about him as morally holy. But they said the problem with mixing these two ways of talking about God, calling him impersonal and personal, is they're incompatible. An impersonal force can't exhibit personal attributes. So an impersonal force can't love, can't forgive. I mean, think about electricity. That's an impersonal force, isn't it? Okay, think about that. Can that give us empathy? Can it love us? Can it be creative? No. And secondly, the two ways of talking about God being impersonal and personal, they're incompatible and mutually exclusive, because if you relate to an impersonal oneness, that's different than a personal God. Those are very different issues. If God's personal, then there are moral issues relating to him. It's important to relate to him. Okay, so another point is if these moral issues get violated, there are going to be consequences. Yeah, so that doesn't work very well, the personal and the impersonal. Here's another thing we can do when we talk to the person. Use the good news, bad news principle. Well, what do they mean about that? Well, when you start talking to a new ager and you talk about our sin causes spiritual death, they're so affronted. They're so upset. How can anyone believe something is so negative? It's so unloving. It's so judgmental. They're very positive in their beliefs. Well, here's the catch. New Age teaching does begin with this good news, what a loving, wonderful God, but it ends with bad news. Christianity is just the opposite. It begins with bad news, but it ends with good news. So let's try the New Age belief. Good news, bad news, right? So it starts well, but ends badly. So they say God is unconditionally loving. Oh, he loves everybody. Nobody's going to get judged. Okay, what's the bad news to that? Well, the kind of God that we can be, that we talk about there is not the kind of God who's able to love. Love is interpersonal. It happens between people, not between some impersonal being. What about the idea of there are many paths to God? We hear them say that. There's many paths to God as there are paths to the top of a mountain. That sounds great, doesn't it? So there's good news, bad news there. Here's the good news. From the New Age perspective, nobody's going to be judged for failing to choose the right path, right? Choose whatever path you want. You'll get to the top of the mountain. What's the bad news? Well, salvation is based on the path that we must walk, right? What are we talking about? Human effort. We've got to do it. It's all up to us. If we wander off the path or fall off the path, that's on us. And there's no assurance concerning what happens after death. Who knows how that person is going to be reincarnated? But salvation in Christianity, it's a gift, not something to be earned. Boy, is that good news. I love that one. They said, let's talk about another thing while we're talking about salvation. Ask a New Ager a question like this. What is reincarnation or enlightenment? What's the goal? And when they talk about that, listen to the kind of language that they'll use. They'll talk about salvation on human effort, Jesus is an example, a standard of perfection that has to be met. It's a gradual process. But of course, all these things are opposite to the biblical way of salvation, aren't they? Salvation is based on God's grace according to Christianity. It's an immediate gift. It focuses on our sinfulness. Yeah, I think that's really good. Okay, let's go one more step of the the good news, bad news of the New Age movement. The New Age belief. Health is a matter of your mind. You just have to implant positive thoughts and they manifest themselves as health. Well, that's great news, isn't it? At least to start with. Guaranteed, right? That's really good. In fact, there's a quote here from Shakti Gawain. The more we bring our consciousness into alignment with our highest spiritual realization, the more our bodies will express our own individual perfection. Oh, that's great. Well, wait, where's the bad news? Well, who's at fault if the healing doesn't take place? If we don't have manifest health, if we have a cancer or some terrible diabetes, something like that, who's at fault? We are. We didn't put enough positive thoughts. So that's really sad. It's personal failure. That's really negative, isn't it? All right, well, as they begin to wrap up the chapter here, the conclusion, New Agers are on a search for spirituality. Yeah, that's good. But they often fail to consider Christianity because they have negative stereotypes of Christians. So we need to show concern. We need to have a listening ear. We shouldn't just be judging them. And you'll break that stereotype of Christianity. So they said, here are a couple of major themes that we should keep in mind as we talk to a New Ager. Number one, God is personal. Oh, I like that. God is personal. That's good news. You can pray to him. He'll respond. He cares about us. Here's the second major theme, the good news, bad news principle, right? We flip it around. The New Ager has good news, but it's followed by bad news when you play it out to the end. Christianity flips it around. It's got bad news first. We're sinners. We've rebelled against God. We don't deserve to be with him. We've broken our connection with him. But the good news comes. God has made a way for us to reestablish a relationship. So he said, these two themes are going to help you have a good biblical response to a lot of the issues that the New Ager would present. And the idea is to bring the New Ager to the point of questioning his or her firmly held beliefs about God and how we really get to know them. So at the very end of the chapter, there are books that you can take a look at. Like one is, sounds good. It's called Reincarnation, a Christian Appraisal. That one sounded good. How about, let's see here, looking at several of these. Norm Geisler. He wrote one. I didn't know that, but he's written everything. Norm Geisler, what a prolific author. He wrote The Reincarnation Sensation. Yeah. Then there's Elliot Miller, another really thoughtful person. A book called A Crash Course on the New Age Movement. Yeah, that sounds really good. Sounds interesting. Okay, and then there's books critical of the New Age movement. John Ankerberg has one. Trying to look for, Doug Groothuis. Boy, anything by him is excellent. That's Groothuis. First name Douglas. Last name is pronounced Groothuis. And his book is called Confronting the New Age. He's also got another book called Revealing the New Age Jesus. He's got a third book called Unmasking the New Age. So I think one person that you might want to go to for information, Doug Groothuis. He's got a website. I forget if it's douglasgroothuis.com or douggroothuis.com, but lots of good material there. So one more time, Groothuis. Odd spelling, huh? Well, thank you so much for being part of this podcast. Again, the book was The Compact Guide to World Religions. I think you can see that it's got good information and good challenges for us as Christians and how to present our faith in a logical fashion with kindness, which we all ought to practice all the time anyway, huh? Well, I hope your day is going well. Thanks for being part of our podcast today.